Hi everybody, Nigel here, Nigel's Land Rover channel, and thought I'd just do a video actually for those of you that have always wondered how a Tdci Puma MT82 transmission comes apart. I don't think anybody's done a video of it, and I certainly couldn't find anything online other than a couple of older Mustang videos, and the Mustang gearbox has some differences. I believe from talking to people on Defender2.net that the MT82 that's in the Land Rover was actually built in Germany, and the one that's in the Mustang is built in China. Now, I know the one in the Mustang is renowned to be weak, poor shifting and all sorts of problems. I believe also there's a lawsuit against Ford, going on in America. So, don't know, we'll see what happens with that one. But I've got an MT82 in my Mustang here, which is 6-speed manual, and it's absolutely fine. Sometimes if you're really giving it some, you do get blocked out between gears, but I believe that's the clutch rather than the gearbox. Then you've got the 18 plus models, and they decided to fit aluminium shift forks in them. And when you see inside this gearbox how little room there is and how slim and slender the shift forks have to be, you'll see what a crazy idea that was. Why they did it, I do not know. Probably cost, as usual these days. Everything comes down to cost, you know. Make it crap, make it thin, let it break and recall it. That seems to be the way the things go these days. But yeah, enough of a rant. So yeah, I believe they've gone back to the steel selector forks now in the MT82s. So basically, yeah, this video is going to show you how they come apart and what sort of tools you need and what to be prepared for. Now, I've gone on and done the first few stages as far as getting the end casing off, because I didn't want to video it while I was experimenting different techniques and stuff, because I wanted to get around doing this with standard tools you could buy off the shelf, rather than having to buy or make special tooling. So I've got it apart, and what I'll do is I'm going to go through and show you basically how I did it, explain how I did it, and show you what I did it with. So without further ado, let's carry on. Okay, so here we go. We got some parts on the bench I'm going to show you here, and then we'll look at you know, where they actually came from and how I got them off and everything. So starting off with, the first thing you need to do is get this rear casing off. This rear casing back here that I'm pointing at now, that's just a ring of bolts, and that goes on around the around the gearbox. I've actually got it upside down, so it goes on that way, and I've got a ring of bolts around here that basically you take that off, and that gives you access to the output shaft conversion for the MT82. And this is basically, you've got this part here, and then you've got your output shaft here, which drives the transfer box, and this spline on here is what gets a lot of wear. If you look on Defender2.net forums, you'll see loads of information about it, and I'm very lucky, mine was greased and hasn't worn at all. But it would appear that many people, when they take this off, they find the inside here is all rusty and the splines are worn out, so worth looking at there. And I'll show you on the actual gearbox itself how I actually got this all undone and got it off. And there is a great big 30mm bolt there that goes in, and I think it's an M20 that goes in, and basically you have to undo that and then pull that off. In the front of the gearbox we got the release bearing and I guess you call it the slave cylinder that actually opens and closes the clutch. So they've got that there. That just comes out with three Torx bolts. I've put those back in the bell housing, and also next to there you've got this cap. Now this looks like a plastic cap, but it's actually tin. It's metal. Drill through it. I went through with a 3mm drill and screwed a soft tapper into it. Used a slide hammer to pull it out, and it just ripped straight through. So I drilled another hole in the side, turned the slide hammer on an angle, and pulled it out that way, and that worked. That exposes this bolt here, which goes in the end of the counter shaft, so it's kind of next to here. So that's sat in the bell housing like that, and then this one's down here with that cover behind it, or cover over the front of it. This is a 12mm Allen key on mine. The manual actually shows it as a Torx. That was bloody tight, really, really tight. I couldn't believe how tight it was. It was actually tighter than this one, I think. But yeah, hell's job getting that out. It is a normal left-hand thread, sorry, a normal right-hand thread, so it just undoes normally. But sometimes you think, am I going the wrong way here? But it does undo normally, and it comes out absolutely fine, but bloody tight. And you need to keep this this locked up while you do it with the transmission in gear, so you can actually undo it. So once that's off, Then you need to look at taking the selector off, which is here. This is the gear selector, and this goes into the ball in the bottom of the gear stick, and this actually goes onto the shaft on the back of the gearbox. And there's kind of a cotter pin thing here that holds it in. You can see that there, and that needs to be pressed out. I used a small ball joint splitter to actually get around this like that, and sort of get around it and press it out. So that's what you need to do with that, because as you can see there, it's got a taper on it. I've got the drain plug there. Remove this reverse switch first, because this sits on the back of the gearbox housing, and if you roll the gearbox on its side, you'll break that off. So yeah, that's plastic obviously, so take that off. That's a 22mm. Next thing to do then is start looking at the detents. Now this is where I really start pulling the air out, because the designers of this transmission have decided that it's best to have these knock-in plugs for ease of assembly rather than using grub screws. The pain in the ass is you have to drill them to get them out. So you drill in the end of them with a 5.5mm drill, then you screw an M6 bolt into there and then pull them out with a slide hammer, and then they're scrap. Great, so you have to buy new ones. I found them online. A full set is about £85, and this is the big one that goes on the side next to the gear stick, and that one I drilled out, but then it fell apart, so ended up drifting it out. So that's the big one. So yeah, it's a shame, but yeah, they're scrap now, so they have to be replaced. Once you've done that, then you need to remove these are the selector bolts. There's 6 of them, and they go in the side of the gearbox, and the selector arms actually pivot on them. So you'll see that when we get to the gearbox. Then we've got the 13 bolts here, all around the end casing, and then we need to pull the casing off. That's where the fun starts. Okay, so going back to where we started, I talked about getting this output shaft hub off. You've obviously got the great big nut in the centre. Now you need to hold this in place while you do that. So what I did, I got a block of metal, bolted it to the casing here, and then I got this piece of 15mm wide aluminium stock, and I literally hammered it into the slot like so, beat it down in there, and then turned it so it jammed up against the metal block, and that became my stop. Then I was able to undo the nut, go around the front of the gearbox, get that counter shaft bolt off and everything, and then just take all this off. And then using a simple 3-legged puller, I just pulled this off. Okay, now something I have done, obviously the end of the 3-legged puller is shaped like so. There we go, this is just a cheap Clark one. And while you're turning it, this could damage the internal threads down inside, because that goes actually down inside that shaft. Okay, bottom's out in there. So what I did, I put a piece of tube around that piece of metal tube, and then that protects the threads if it should rock sideways or anything. So that's something worth remembering, because the threads may well be quite soft. So once that's done, obviously use the 3-legged puller, pull that hub off. Then we've got to move on to our actual removal of the detents. As you can see, there's one in here, there's one there, there's one there, and then you've got the big one round on this side. Now you've also got a couple down here. There's one here, one here. I'm led to believe you could leave them in, because it'll all come apart with them left in. So I'm not going to hammer them out if I don't have to. Because as I say, some bright spark, some engineer thought, yeah, great, we'll make this so it's easy to assemble, but they've cost us a fortune when we strip it down, as with most things these days. So I'm going to be replacing this main seal here on the back. I'm not going to bother replacing the seal on the selector shaft, that's absolutely fine. And I'm going to replace the seals on the front of the gearbox as well, just in case. That big one I talked about here, I found on eBay for about £1.50, so that's worth remembering. And nothing on this gearbox is particularly expensive. I think I already mentioned these detents. The full kit, which is 4 of the smaller ones and the one big one, was about £85, I think, plus the VAT. But I'll keep shopping around, see if I can find it cheaper. If I do, I'll let you know. So once that's off, we remove our selector fork bolts, which come from here, here, and here. Okay, and we've got them like 3 either side, so there's 6 in total. And then we're okay to pull the end cover off. Now, they talk about using long-legged pullers and stuff like that. I don't have long-legged pullers. I don't even have a 2-legged puller. I only have 3. I've got a medium, large, and a small 3-legged pullers. I've also got a tiny one for windscreen wipers. So I had to get around using my 3-legged puller somehow. So what I did, a little bit of invention, a little bit of thought. How am I going to do this? The reason you're pulling it off is there's dowels down here. There's one there and there's one there, which I think, where's that? There, which I think get corroded in. And you've also got the bearing on the end of the output shaft, which is pulled it off. Now, how did I pull it off? Used a 3-legged puller, this one here, and as you can see, if I lay this on its side, as you can see here, you've got the legs coming down, and you've got 2 holes in each leg. Where am I? You've got 2 holes in each leg. So what I did, I put this down inside there as normal. I put one leg under this bolt here, under this lug here. I put one leg under this lug here, and I put one leg under here. Now, as you can see, you come around to the side, you can see the distance between there and there is a lot greater than the distance between there and there and there and there. So what I did was had the 2 legs on the shorter side in the top hole, sorry, in the bottom hole, and the leg that has to be longer I put in the top hole, so it's sort of uneven, but it pulled it square. And what I was able to do then was just put some pressure on, apply some heat, give it a tap, put some pressure on, apply some heat, and eventually it just came off. It came with a bang first of all, and then it just came off. So if you want to try that, I mean, if you go and break your casing, I'm not going to be held responsible, but I was very, very gentle with it, just kept even pressure, kept applying heat, because heat, as we all know, is your saviour with stuff like this, and just kept gently pulling, and away it came. So that's as far as I've got. So now we're going to look at moving on and actually stripping this gearbox. And the first thing I'm going to do is show you these selector forks and talk about why they changed them to aluminium. Okay, so this housing is going to lift off like this. This casing is just going to lift off like so. And as we can see here, I can show you, we've got the reverse idler gear in there. We've got the, is that the lay shaft or the main shaft? Lay shaft rear bearing at the bottom there. And we've also got the output shaft main bearing at the back there. That's absolutely huge. That is a TM398, is that? Weird. But it's huge. So don't think I'll be replacing that one. I don't think I need to replace any bearings in here. But everything's nice and clean, as you can see. So there's a bit of discoloration, so we'll give it a good clean and a reseal. And nice to know that it's all okay, really. So there we go, that's that casing there. So that can go to one side. And then we can see in here, we've got our selector forks. Now, let's just have a look at this. You can see here, that selector fork. This is first, second, I believe. Whereas now that's reverse, isn't it? I think that's first, second, I can't remember. But anyway, if you look at that selector fork, it's fabricated steel, it's welded there. It comes around onto the selector arm there. They decided to make this out of aluminium. Yeah, well done Ford, really great idea. Whether it was cheaper to cast them than fabricate them, probably, so that's why they made them out of aluminium, and then people in their Mustangs were just breaking them for a pastime. There you go. It's actually quite funny. If you look at a video, I can't remember his name now, but if you look up Mustang stuff, you'll find it's a guy with a he's got like a Spanish name. I can't think of his name. He actually does a video and like saying, what's all the problem about? Let me just show you. This is what you need to do. This is how you shift properly, and then you won't break your selector forks. So he goes off down the freeway, floors it, changes gear. Oh yeah, fine. Changes into third, and bang, breaks the selector fork. And he's making a video showing you how not to break your selector forks. That's how fragile they were. So yeah, I believe they've changed now from 19 onwards. So there we go. So the next thing I'll do now is take this selector shaft out of here, and then various other bits. I've got to knock a pin out of here, I believe, or a pin out of here, and then I can get the rest of it apart. But I'll show you all that on the video as we go. One other thing, if you notice here, something I hate in modern gearboxes, we've got synchro rings down here, and they're not brass anymore, they're sintered. For God's sake, they have to keep saving money in everything they do. None of the savings get passed on to us, but we have bloody sintered synchro rings. Jesus. Oh, and these as well. These fork guides on the end, where you used to have like a lump of brass or whatever, now it's a piece of plastic. So I think you can get brass upgrades for them. I might look into that. But yeah, everything's just cheap and crap, isn't it? Okay, so here we are back again. This is actually about 3 hours later now, although for a couple of seconds for you. So the next thing you have to do is remove this magnet. So we've got this magnet in here. in the bottom of the gearbox, and as you can see we've picked up some debris on there. This is 16,000 miles by the way, so that's a good indicator to what you're going to find. Unfortunately, like with many modern vehicles now, they've put this magnet inside, so to get it and remove the debris you actually have to strip the back of your gearbox down. So yeah, great idea, well done. I don't know why they can't put it in a sort of, you know, like they do with cars where they put a plug in the side, or the transfer box would have a magnet on the dipstick, on the filler plug. So I think I might do that on here. I might speak to Gwyn Lewis to see if he'll look at making some with a magnet on. So anyway, there we go. So that's that out. So I'll put that to one side because it's quite manky. So they're also quite difficult to clean off because obviously everything that's on there is stuck to it. So the easiest way is dry it all off and then blow it off with an airline. So what we're going to do next, according to the book, is remove the first... No, we're going to remove the reverse gear selector, which is this one. So I'm guessing we just basically slide this out. Does it turn and come out? Yeah. Just tell us to remove that. And I can't get it out because there's a plate holding it in the bottom. So let's have a look at the manual again. Okay, so it did come out with a little pull in the end. This plate on the bottom has some movement in it. So we're going to take out this fork. Make sure we don't lose the plastic. We've got these plastic guides there that go into the bulk ring, or into the selector ring, whatever you want to call it. So put that to one side. I've got some clean paper on the bench. I'm putting everything on. And then the next thing it's doing is saying, using the special tools, remove the first and reverse gear assemblies. Remove the first gear selector, remove and discard the pin. So got a pin down in here we've got to knock out. So let me see how we're going to get that out. Okay, so I've got a brass drift here rather than use a steel one. So I'm just going to come in and just tap this. Well, that comes out easy. So I'm just going to hold the drift and make sure I don't drop the pin. So there's our pin out. That's just a simple roll pin. No need to discard it. You can use that again. Too much of this bloody throwing stuff away these days. Modern engines and stuff. So we'll put the brass drift, or we'll put the drift away because we may need it again. These brass drifts, they come in a set by Stara. Absolutely brilliant. Great for using so you don't damage anything. So yeah, we've got to remove that now. So we're going to lift this selector out. There we go, and pull the fork away like that. Can you believe they actually cast these in aluminium? Aluminum to our friends across the Atlantic. So there we go, so that can go there. We'll keep that together, and then what I'll do is I'll lay all this out on the bench and I'll photograph it all to make sure I know how it all goes back. So now we've got to use a three-legged puller and remove the first and reverse gear assembly from the output shaft. So that's going to pull under here. So I'll get the puller set up and we'll see how we go. Okay, so piece of tube down inside there, protect those threads. Put the puller on. This is just a cheap, nasty machine mark. Cheap and nasty thing. And then we'll tighten that up. Now I need to be very careful here because what we don't want to do is chip the teeth on the edge. So we need to be very careful and make sure that we're actually pulling square and that the edge of the teeth aren't up the ramp here. Okay, so if those edge of the teeth are on the ramp, you will chip them easily because they're quite hard and sort of locally quite brittle. So let's get the spanner on there and give these a little pull and see what happens. See how easy or not it's going to come off. It would appear perhaps not very easily at all. Okay, so we need to get a bar. Okay, so with a longer bar, it eventually came. So here you go. You can hear that coming up now. No damage on the teeth, and it's coming away beautifully. With that tube in there, as you can see, as it moves to the side, it can't touch the threads. So For me, that's a must-have. There we go, you can hear it. Put it away, okay. There we go. Lift this out of the way. Back on the bench. And we can lift this gear assembly off without dropping the bearing on the floor. Okay, you didn't actually miss-see that, it actually happened. Now, what happened was, I pulled up on here, basically because you can't get a puller in here. So basically that sits like that, and then when you pull it up, it sits under here. So you think, well, I'll just grab this gear and lift it out. And unfortunately, there is a hub under there with a bearing in it. So the thing to do is either lift the whole assembly out of one, or take this top piece off separately, but keep your fingers under there, because on the back side, there is a bearing, and yes, it dropped out on the floor, and yes, the needles came out of the cage. So yes, that now needs a thorough clean, which is all going to get anyway, so I'm not too bothered. But one of the good things about this is you'll see my mistakes and learn from it. So so basically now we need to lift this gear off here, and this gear is also on a bearing. Now I'm not sure if that bearing split. Okay, so that bearing's going to come away, that gear's going to come away, and then that bearing is going to sit inside that gear. I'm going to put it back in the way that it came out. There we go. So we've now got the shaft there, we've now got to do some more work here. Alright, this snap ring goes in there. Snap ring holds the first and second synchronizer on. That has taken me about 25 minutes to get off. It was absolutely solid in the groove, really tight. So I've had to basically tap it round with a brass drift, lever it out a bit, tap it round, lever it out, and then use the proper pliers to expand it and get it off. But yeah, real difficult to get off. So something worth remembering, that one. Now I've got to find a way of getting this gear. I've got to pull this gear off from the end of the shaft. Okay, so there we can see the second gear is actually, is it the second gear or is it the third gear? This is the first gear bearing, and this is the second gear, and the second gear synchro. So this is the second gear here. So basically you have to get a puller under here. It's very tight, there's no gap or anything. So what I did was actually put it on the press and put some blocks under here, and then just gently pressed, put the little block under, press, and about a 1/16 of an inch at a time, because you've got some, you can see you've got some end float on this shaft. This shaft lifts up, so you can lift the shaft up, put something under the gear, press down, lift the shaft up, press down, lift the shaft up, press down. And it's taken me probably 2.5 hours to do this, but I don't have a puller with legs that are sharp enough to get under that gear. So that comes off like so. So we've got to make sure we keep the synchro in one piece. So it comes off like so. And then we've got a bearing inside here, which you must make sure you keep in there and try and keep the same way around, and like I did earlier with it dropping on the floor. So that can go on the bench now, and that can stay there as one assembly. The next thing we've got to do is get rid of remove this selector plate and remove this bearing plate. But that's going to be for tomorrow. Okay, so moving on now, we've got the next day. We've got to take these bolts out of here, out of this selector plate. That's what they're calling it, selector plate. So selector shaft locking plate. It floats around. As you can see, what I'll do is I'll zoom in so you can see what's going on. And that just, you can see that floats around, and we've got to take out a bolt back here and a bolt here, and there's a couple of spaces under there as well. There's one of them. And then there's the other one. So those two bolts there, as you can see. Then the plate is going to lift out like so, and then we've got these two spacers underneath which are stuck on by, they're hydraulic on with the oil. There we go, that's the two spacers. So the next thing I'll do is undo these three bolts. There's one here, there's one here, and there's one over here, and remove this plate. Okay, so those bolts are in with thread locks, so it's a good idea to wind them in and out, in and out, in and out, so you don't snap them. So those three bolts come out like that, and there's these two, this one here and this one here, has like a metal spacer sleeve under it. This one's just plain straight to the aluminium, so but the bolt lengths are all the same, so that's absolutely fine. So they can all go away in the parts box. Like so. Now then, this is where it gets a bit complicated, and I'm going to try and show you with the camera what the manual is talking about and how it's wrong, just for a change. Okay, so this is the bit we've just done. Now the printout's a bit weird, so it's telling you down here, remove the selector shaft locking plate, 2 bolts, 2 spacers, which we've done, so that's done there. Then it's telling us to remove the 3 center bearing mounting plate, remove the 3 bolts. So you should be able to just lift that plate out, and as you can see here, it's showing these 2 little selector shafts, which are just little stubs, and there's nothing off the side of the main selector here. Okay. Then it's telling us to remove these bearings, okay, which is fine. So then we go over the page, and it's telling us here that we need to, I have to look down here first of all because it goes over the next page. Remove the 3rd, 4th gear selector from the transmission housing. Release the selector fork from the selector shaft. Okay, so here, if you remember back here, we've got 2 little stubs and no prong sticking left off that selector shaft, and then we come over here, oh look, we've got a prong sticking left off to the selector shaft, here we are, there, and we've actually got a shaft. So yeah, the manual's just a joke. These manuals are put together by people fresh out of university, I expect, that have never even seen a gearbox. So yeah, it's a bit of a balls up again. These Land Rover manuals are bloody awful, but at least they're free online. So what we need to do is try and get this shaft out. I'll show you what we've actually got. This is the shaft that I'm talking about, and then we've got these 2 selector shafts here, and you can see that this one is engaged in this one here. It does come round and come out, as you can see. It will spring out of there, but there's no way I can lift that plate out with this in the way because it's not going to come over it. So we need to do something alternative. Okay, so what I've discovered is at the lower end of this shaft, it goes into a bearing, and it's keyed into like a pawl with a spring on it to keep tension on it. So the tension is kept on this side here, so it's basically turning it anti-clockwise, looking down on the end. So what I'm going to do is just take the tension off it here, pull it up, and then it becomes free, and then we can just lift it out like so. And there are 4 bearings on the end, as you can see there, and we need to make sure we don't lose those. So there we go. And now we should be able to just lift this plate out. Should is what I said, wasn't it? There we go. So just lift that plate over those shafts, and there's our bearing races in there, so they're absolutely fine. Yeah, absolutely fine. It's got tags on to stop them spinning, which is good. And then so we've got our plate off, so that's that. So now we can look at getting the selector forks out. So I need to change the angle of the camera. Okay, so now we've got to fish our fingers down in here and get the 3rd, 4th gear selector out, because that's dropped down where we've been moving it all around. Of course, when you take those pivot bolts out, which I showed you at the beginning, they're all free. The pivot bolts go in here. So that's the 3rd, 4th selector gear out. That can't go selector fork. That can't go any other way, so there's no need to mark it or anything. That can go back on the bench, and then this shaft should just pull out. Yep, as it does. Just get a screwdriver under here. Just give it a helping hand. As we say, we should be able to get it over those detents without pulling them out. There we go. It does. There we go. It does come up and out. So we don't need to replace those detents in the bottom. Although, having said that, if we're going to have to buy them in a set, we may as well. So that's that one out. That's the 3rd, 4th selector shaft. And then what we can do is do the same here with this one. Get under here and lever it up like so. And then we can twist it around. Sorry you can't see what I'm doing down here, but basically I'm just, there we go, just twisting the selector shaft around so that it comes out of the selector fork. Then we should be able to get under here. Just there we go, that was out. Just to show you what I was doing off camera, basically here's the fork, here's the shaft, and when they're in the gearbox they're engaged, better I'll show you like that, they're engaged like so, and all I'm doing is twisting the selector shaft around and manipulating it so allow it to pull upwards and out. So again, we get our hands down in here and get this 5th, 6th gear fork out. Wow, that's tight down in there. There we go. So that's that fork out. Again, it's got these horrible plastic ends on it, and again that can only go one way, so we don't need to worry about that too much. Right, so now these 2 shafts have to come out, and I think they have to be pressed out from the other side. So I'm going to get it over on the press and we'll press it out. Okay, so we've got the casing now set up in the press. So you can see I've got a brass bung down in there on the bare end, steel bar going up to the actual press itself. And what I've done, I've got an old t-shirt and I've wrapped that around the bottom so that as these spindles fall out, these shafts fall out, they should just fall into that t-shirt. I'm going to put some water blankets or something underneath just in case, but there we go, that's how that's pressed out, and then we should be able to look at this area inside that we're all concerned about where the breather goes. And there we go, that's how it looks when you get it pressed out and the casing off. If you haven't got a press, I would imagine you could put the actual casing, I'd imagine you could put that up on a couple of blocks of wood and just tap it through it. It took hardly any pressure at all. You're pressing down on this shaft here, and then this comes out of the back of the input shaft. So yeah, it's really hardly any force at all. So you can see they're sat there now on the edge of these gears here in the press and in the t-shirt. So get it all cleared up and go from there. Okay, so this seal on the input shaft, in the manual they tell you to use a slide hammer and a screw and this sort of thing, you know. So basically that doesn't work. So basically what I've done is just made a hole, just punctured a hole with a screwdriver in the front of the seal. I've then got a like a T20, what is this, a I think it's about a T25 Torx bit in a little short stubby screwdriver because you haven't got much room, and then using electrical screwdrivers because the plastic will protect the aluminium. I can just get in there and lever the seal out like so. So it takes a bit of effort. You know, I've just shown you at the end of the last bit, but there we go. So that seal is now destroyed. And then down inside here we've got a little snap ring, so we'll see how easy that comes out. Should come out quite easily. Yeah, that's a lot better than that one on the one on the third gear, was it? That one was an absolute nightmare. Yeah, this one is playing up a little bit. So, there we go. Now I've got to go back to the press and press this shaft out of this bearing. And there we go, there's the input shaft removed now, so we've just got the bearings there. Now I'll get those bolts out, move those bearings so I can clean the casings without risk of washing any dirt into them. You can see this it's quite dirty in there. It's quite surprising how bits and pieces that are in them. Some of them may be from my disassembly, but anyway, one of the main reasons for stripping this was to look at this mechanism here. Now this area here is where this bolt goes through, and this is the bolt for the breather. And one of the big issues with this gearbox is the breather is a joke. Basically, you've got a plastic unit that presses in there. Now, that's not going to seal at all in there because there's no O-rings, right? Although there is a couple of O-rings, but it's a very loose fit. It's not going to seal in there at all. And then it breathes into the bell housing here. So it's really not a lot of point. If you go deep wading, your gearbox is going to suddenly cool because of the cold water, and it could well pull water in from the bell housing. Depending how deep you are, depending how much water there is in your bell housing. There's no wading plugs in this gearbox. You've got holes in the sides of the bell housing which will allow water in, and then down in the bottom here you can see you've just got a little cutout. You don't get a drawn and tapped hole, which I may well do. I may well put a drawn and tapped hole in there, and then I can get to it. So, and you've got plenty of air for the bell housing to breathe through the top, so there's no reason why you should ever have to take that wading plug out. So anyway, basically we've got this bolt here which goes into this unit here, and what we want to know is if your gearbox is in your car, can you take that bolt out safely to do a modification to fit a breather? Because luckily what's good, this here is the perfect size for tapping a 3/8 BSP thread into. So basically if you take this bolt out, tap a thread in there, 8th BSP, not 3/8 BSP, 8th BSP, and then basically just put it back in. So let's have a look and see what happens when we take this bolt out. Now this shaft here, as I showed you before, has these 4 bearings on the end, and they're going to drop down into, you can see down in the bottom of there's a square hole. So this is going to drop down in there like so. It's difficult to do with one hand on the camera. So that drops down in there, and then as you can see what happens is when you select gears, it's moving that spring down at the bottom, and I think that bolt is holding that spring assembly in. So basically with the gearbox in the car, this will be horizontal. So what I would suggest initially is to put it into 4th gear, so you're pushing this shaft forwards. Okay, you want this shaft as forward as you can get it, and then that's going to stop anything falling off. So let's have a look what happens when we remove that bolt. Okay, so 21mm socket. I'm going to start undoing this bolt and see what happens. And this is basically what's going to happen inside your gearbox when you undo it. I have a feeling that spring is going to pull that away. And bear in mind this shaft would be supported on the top, so if there's any movement like this, then it won't happen in your gearbox. So basically there's that bolt. Now it's got a very, very fine thread on, as we can see here. Where are we? There we go. You can see it's got a very fine thread, and there was some sealant on there. So basically what's happening is this shaft is now stopping that unit being pulled out by its spring pressure. Right, now this bolt has got a 8mm hole in the end, so we can draw that out and tap that to 8th BSP, and then screw in one of the Gwyn-Lewis elbows you get with the kit. You could put a swivel in there, or you could put a solid one in there, whatever, and I'm sure you'd have enough clearance to get up under the, because basically you would be, let's come back out, no, come back out this way. Basically you would be trying to get your hand in this way and down through the top of the gearbox, so I'm sure there'd be enough room to get in there with a 21mm open-ended spanner, take this bolt out, do the work on it, and then put it back in. So you may be able to get it from the engine bay. It's probably sort of halfway. Because of the stupid Puma bulkhead with the welded in front section of the tunnel, it doesn't allow you to get to it too easily. But there we go. So let's see what happens now. If I screw this bolt back in, which is going to be easier said than done. There we go. So yeah, that may be a problem when if you take that bolt out and it's in your gearbox. Let's have a look. I can mock this up. Okay, so let's see what happens now. We're in the horizontal position. We've got the rear casing on the gearbox, so the selector shaft is supported at both ends. I've got it pushed forward, so it's in 4th gear. So let's get this, let's take this bolt out, see what happens. Because the big thing is, people say that if you take this bolt out, you'll never get it back in again. And some say you can't. Let's get this plastic breather tube out of the way. Okay, so that's taken out of there. Right, so I'm not going to touch anything. I'm not going to disturb the gearbox at all. I can screw that back in there, no problem at all. He says. Need to be a bit careful because it's an aluminium part and it's a fine thread. So if I just wiggle the this is interesting. So I've got one of my brass punches here. Let's see, I can lever it. I can see the part inside is moving around, but I don't think it's going to let me screw that back in. Yeah, it's kind of pulling back that way, so I guess what we could do is put a taper on the front of that thread. That would help and kind of guide it in. And there we go, it's gone in now. So yeah, the answer is you can do it, but it may be a little dodgy. So put that in there now. Tighten that up, no problem. So I guess you've just got to hope and pray that if you want to do this, when you take it out, that it doesn't move. Let's take it out again. I'm not going to touch it. See if I can screw it back in. Yes, that's gone back in. So basically the answer is yes, you can, and if you do have a problem, worst comes to worst, you have to get something in there and just move it so that you can get it down in there. Okay, and I'll just show you exactly what it is I'm talking about. When you look down in there, you can see, there's the light. You can see, where are we? You've got the aluminium threaded part down in below, and you've got the plain drilled out part of the casing. And if we look straight down in there, we can just see that the aluminium is slightly to the left in this picture. So all I've done is got a brass drift and gone down in there like so, and just moved the thread over. Okay, so answer is yes, it can be done, but it looks like it might be a little bit dodgy. Okay, so looking at the assembly down in here again, just to show you all what it's doing, because it doesn't explain it at all in the manual as far as I can see. That's nothing new. So basically, as I said, this is the mechanism that keeps the tension on the main selector shaft. So basically it keeps it turn, as you're looking at it now, it keeps it turn anti-clockwise against these, if you remember there were two selector shafts here, so it keeps it turned. You can see they go into those boards down here, and it keeps it turned against them. So so basically all I've done is you've got this spring here, I've popped that off, that goes over that pin there and over that pin there, so that keeps that in place. So if we undo this bolt, the one we're talking about, the breather bolt on the outside, take that out, take that bolt out of there, so basically you can put that bolt on the bench, and this lifts out with the spring, okay, and there, as you can see, your fine aluminium thread in there, so that lifts out with your spring on it. And then down in here you've got the 4 slots that the bearings go into, and on the back of there's another bearing here, just a solid bearing, and that's going to go onto that pin down there like so. Trying to do this one-handed is not easy, you get the idea, I hope. There we go, it's going to go on there like that, and then that will turn in and it goes up against these 2 stops down in here. So that's it, guys. Right, so these 2 detents, I tried to knock them out from inside. There's no room, you can't get enough swing, so I couldn't get them to shift. I even tried heating. So basically what I've done, rather than, in the manual they tell you to drill them out to 5.5mm and then just screw an M6 bolt in there. What I've done, I've actually drawn them out 5mm and actually tapped an M6 thread. So should make the job a lot sweeter. So basically that's going to screw in there like that, and then we can do a slide hammer and we can just pull that out like so, and there it is. The other thing I noticed is when I tried to get that from the inside, it's actually damaged it a bit as well, so that was a waste of time. I would have just left them, but I'm concerned about getting the shafts back in with them there. I think it might be quite difficult, especially when you've got everything in the way. You can't see what you're doing, and you have to buy a set anyway, so. Whoops, that one's pulled the thread out by the look of it. So what I'm going to do here is pull it over at an angle. No, that's not going to have it, so that's going to need some other remedial action to get it to come out. No, so I have to put something else in there. The actual kit comes with a great big self-tapping screw, so I'll try putting that in there and see if that will pull it out. So let's see what happens now. I put the screw in there, get it to bite. I think got it. Yeah. There we go, that's come out. So there we go, there's our detent. And as I said, I mean, why oh why do manufacturers do this? What's wrong with a bloody grub screw and a spring and a ball? I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. You know, I mean, that must have cost more to make. I mean, you've got a ball, you've got a spring, so they've had to make this casing and swage it all together and then press it in. What's wrong with having a bloody grub screw and a ball? And the other trouble is, I think they're 11mm diameter. So, yeah, they're 11mm diameter, so you would have to tap them out M12 and put an M12 grub screw in there, which is going to be quite deep, so you'll have no room left for your spring. So, I don't know, I may see if I can make something up, because I just don't agree with this bloody throwaway society. We're supposed to be green and sort of conserving stuff and that, and now, you know, with the Tdci engine, the bloody front cover and the sump, they tell you to throw it away and buy a new one rather than remove the sealant from the old one, you know. But anyway, I keep moaning about this shit, and I doubt if anyone's listening. And there we go then, guys. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it's been a bit educational for you. And as I said earlier, I think this is the only MT82 stripped down video on YouTube. certainly for the Land Rover gearbox anyway. And as I say, there are some for the earlier American Mustang, but there are some differences. They have a much better detent system where you can actually pull them out and reuse them. With a special tool, you can make up the tool or buy the tool, whatever. But these, once you've done them, they're scrap. Unless, I guess, I mean, I'll have a look and see if I can do something. Anyway, so thanks for watching. Hope you've enjoyed it. Oh, just one thing I want to cover. What have I actually used? So if you were going to do the same as me and strip your gearbox and rebuild it, just to check it, clean it, change a couple of bearings, whatever, I've got a bag here of parts. I've got the rear main seal, the rear output shaft seal, which I'm just going to replace. Then we've got the front input shaft seal, which obviously have to replace. We've got the that cover that goes over the front of the counter shaft, you have to replace. And then you've got your, I've decided I'm going to change the selector shaft seal. It's only a couple of quid, so I'm going to change that anyway. And then we've got the detents across the bottom there. So basically, if you're going to rebuild your MT82, that's all you need, and some silicone to seal the joint in the middle. As long as nothing's broken and you don't have to replace anything, then that's it. So, you know, if your input shaft bearing's gone, you know, why go and spend the money on a new gearbox when you can rebuild your own for the cost of a few bearings? And I mean, the bearings look fairly standard, so I'll look into that as well and perhaps mention that in another video about bearing prices and stuff. If you go to someone like Simply Bearings, I think there's one bearing in there which is a 6385, which is probably going to be about 5 quid. You know, so it's worth looking into. And the other thing I want to say is the manual. As usual, the manual is a bit of a joke. I did show you that about where the, you know, you've got the selector rods that aren't there 1 minute and then the next minute they're there, and they're telling you to take a plate off when you can't take it off. So, you know, and it's the same as the rest of the manual. It's not good at all. I think the technical authors could do with replacing, shall we say. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed that, as I say, and I'll see you all soon for another one. Bye for now.